It's been a little while. It's been a minute since we did a podcast.
I know, but we're back now, and it's my turn to start, which I'm excited for because I thought about it this morning before I got on.
Well, you've had like 3 or 4 months to think about it, so I hope you're prepared.
Yeah. So hey, we. I was just gonna fumble through, like trying to remember everything. All right, as you know,
this is the measure of a Star Trek, where
we're doing a podcast about Star stuff. You know, this time we're talking about Star Trek.
Who are you?
Well, as you know, this is the measure of an episode where it is our continuing mission to explore what makes Star Trek proper Star Trek and not just what Picard should have been. I'm Jonathan.
Oh wow, a little snippet of what Jonathan thought of the show so far.
1/5 of it.
Could it be? And I'm Paul, and the criteria by which we judge these episodes. Number 1, is there science fiction inherent to the plot? Number 2, is that science fiction unique or novel in some way? In one way, could it be novel or unique? And number 3, is there a moral or ethical dilemma? I'm Paul.
And I'm Jonathan. And we heard through the grapevine and through reviews and everything that this Star Trek was going to be serialized. And we watched Picard season 1 thinking that it would be serialized. So we decided to do Discovery season 1 the same way we did Picard season 1. In hindsight, I don't feel like that was necessary. I feel like that was actually a bad idea.
You mean we didn't have to watch Picard at all?
Yeah, if we could have avoided those 30 hours we're never going to get back, that would have been great.
Man, when you think about that, like that's 30 hours we watched something and didn't like it. When have you ever done that before where you're like, I'm going to power through this the whole way?
Of 30 hours, I don't think
like
I
Lost.
ever have. Yeah.
Well, you did the Lost and Smallville. I know you watched all of Smallville. I know you're going to say you didn't.
I didn't watch all of it. I think I watched 4 seasons, maybe 5.
Yeah, I told you.
All of it.
I
That's
told
right.
you.
But here's the thing about those. Like Lost is infuriating because it wasn't bad until literally the last episode for me. Like everything up until that point I enjoyed and I was willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, and like the last episode was going to be full of revelations. Maybe like the second to last episode I kind of had my doubts that they were going to be able to cover everything, but I enjoyed it up until the last episode. And Smallville was kind of a guilty pleasure. Like Picard, there were some good spots, especially in like the third episode, but the third season. But the first 2 seasons, we were hoping it would get better every episode. Never did.
Yeah, I think Smallville and Lost are the same in that you're always waiting for something to happen. You're waiting for for Superman to show up, or you're waiting for Superman to show up.
Right.
And either one, just something to happen. Well, the whole show's appeal was that it was predicated on these questions that haven't been answered. And I think the same thing is kind of true with Smallville, in that you're kind of waiting for these things to all congeal and to appear in some sort of recognizable fashion that we can consume. That never really happened for either one.
I would agree with that.
And with Picard, we knew ahead of time. We knew ahead of time in the sense that when we started season 2 and maybe even season 3, that it probably wasn't going to be good. But we kept watching because the fans demanded it, that we watched. So that's how it's different, I guess, because we kept watching, hoping that something would get better. I think that we both knew that when we were watching Picard, we knew it wasn't going to get any better. Right?
Yeah, that's fair. Right.
We knew it. But Discovery, here's the thing about Discovery. I've watched the first 2 or 3 episodes of season 1 many times. I watched it when it first came out, and I was disappointed when I watched it when it first came out. Because there's this whole thing about the first episode not really being necessary.
I would say the first 2 episodes. I didn't realize that, but yeah, like you could start on episode 3 with her being transported to the mines, and then have.
Oh right, yeah, it's a 2-part.
Oh, maybe
the first episode.
But
yeah, It's like a two-parter in the sense that it's like
Right.
this little movie, and then the show starts.
Yeah.
That's kind of what happens. I felt like all of that stuff that we learned is reported to us 1,900 times throughout the course of Discovery that we just don't need it. And nothing really happens that, in terms of character, like almost to me, it would have been more interesting to have Michael Burnham show up at the beginning of episode 3, whatever that is, whenever she shows up and she's already been convicted. That's more interesting because you're like, oh, we've never seen this before. A person who has been convicted of mutiny, here's what happens when you do that in the Star Trek universe. And you're slowly revealing what happens to Michael Burnham and what had happened to her and why these things happen. I guarantee you could sit down one of your girls and have them skip episodes 1 and 2, whichever one is the whole Klingon conflict, and they would not miss anything. They would not be like, am I missing something? Like what, you know, that kind of thing.
And I feel like it actually would have made everything better because it would have had a history that like these characters have that we didn't see. So it's not like, it gives the characters depth without just hitting us over the head with it. And it would make,
And a mystery.
Yep, that's what I was going to say. And it would make the reveals that much more shocking and exciting.
Satisfying.
Yep.
A little bit more satisfying.
Ash Tyler, like I knew that somebody somebody was a Klingon in disguise, and then because of how the series went, it was very obvious who it was. And I knew that Lorca was from the Mirror Universe from the beginning. Again, just because it's been 7 years, I think, since it came out. Maybe 5.
Oh, so you knew because of just spoilers filtering into your subconscious because of you're a Star Trek crazy person and you read that stuff?
Yeah.
Not because it was somehow teleprompted to you.
Right. No. Nothing in the series told me that Ash Tyler was a Klingon. I knew it was somebody, didn't know who it was, didn't remember the name. And I knew that Lorca was from the Mirror Universe. But so knowing those things, first off, I feel like Lorca's eye thing was completely unnecessary. Like that did not it's a brand new thing introduced between the Mirror Universe and our universe, and it felt like an unnecessary Chekhov's gun. And
Leave him out of this.
but that one is actually named after Chekov, right? Like not Chekov Star Trek, but the guy who came up with that, like his name was Chekov. Yeah.
There's 2 Chekhovs?
I mean, I know of the one. Are you talking about the Mirror Chekov?
By the way, what a lazy way to name a character. Now that I'm thinking about it, Chekov. It's like, and his brother Tchaikovsky, and it just seems like such an on the nose way to name a Russian. You know, oh, who's the most famous Russian we can think of? Anyway, yes, I feel like having watched it cold. I appreciated the what do you call that when you are giving something away in little tidbits at the beginning? Foreshadowing.
Yeah. You want to start that sentence
That's
over?
No, it's too late. We've already hit the ground on that one. So I liked it because I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I do agree that it didn't seem to matter. Like that doesn't really enter into his character at all, except it's just a thing they put in because later it's going to pay off. You know, it as you said, you could take it or leave it. It doesn't affect the plot if you cut those 2 things out all of a sudden. I mean, you're like, oh, I guess it's fun for the revelation of like, oh, he's actually from the Mirror Universe type of thing. I liked that little revelation. I was not expecting that. What's his name?
Lorca.
What's the cap? Yeah. I liked that bit. I felt like that was unexpected and a nice little twist. But anyway, hang on. I got to go back to what I was saying. I was saying that I saw the first couple of episodes of season 1 over and over again because I tried to watch it. I tried to watch it several times, and I just sort of had to abort every single time. And each time I became more and more disappointed. I was like, where's this going? It doesn't feel like Star Trek. It just feels like a lot of like Burnham didn't like grab a hold of me. She just seemed like a moody, unactory. You know that thing that people do when they're trying to act like a Vulcan and they just don't act? They think that that's the thing you're supposed to do is act like a robot, and that's a Vulcan.
Right.
It felt like she was trying to do that version because she was raised by Vulcans. And I didn't like it. It just felt a little infuriating to me because I just wanted her to show some kind of emotion, which gets better as the show goes on.
Oh yeah, you got emotion from her for sure. So much crying.
Yeah, it starts coming in a little bit. But I do feel like in terms of having to sit down and watch the whole show, it just gets better and better. Like every episode. Once you settle into the style of the show, and once you settle into what the show is, then it becomes like the best Star Trek show to me.
So
as long as you don't mind there not being a lot of Star Trek in it.
Right. So I feel like it hit our criteria 100%. But I don't feel like it felt more Battlestar Galactica than Star Trek, just because of all of the action and the sci-fi technology that's being used. You know, I feel like Strange New World has that perfect balance between capturing the spirit and essence of the original series from 70 years ago, 60 years ago, where the special effects and technology was limited, but utilizing the advancements of the technology that we have into the episodes. So it doesn't have that like retro futuristic feel, but it feels like what Gene Roddenberry would have done if he had like today's technology with it. And this just felt like how cool can we make our future?
Yes, it felt like a science fiction show.
Yeah.
And my only complaint about the first season is all the Klingon stuff. Yeah.
Go for your thoughts, then I'll tell you mine.
Okay. Is it about Klingons?
Yes.
Here's what I like. I like the part about Klingons where they extrapolated a little bit more as to the culture of what the Klingons are, and maybe they made them, at least the Klingons that we saw, a bit more like fundamentalist religion type of thing, where they still have people who are like Messiah people, you know, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. I appreciated that little detail. What I didn't like is that every time we cut back to the Klingons, as we get through the whole season 1, all it is a singular Klingon making a speech to other Klingons. That's this florid, inspirational talk about gathering people, and I just got so laborious and so boring. Like I didn't care. I mean, the one entertaining thing was listening to them try and speak through their mouthpieces, but we come to learn that wasn't even the Quark syndrome, where it affected his speech, and so every Ferengi had to affect their speech the way Quark did because he sort of set the tone. No, that's how they speak. Like they have that sort of lispy, as though something is in their mouth. That's the way that, at least that they speak English.
Right.
Human. They speak human. So, but that aside, I feel like I didn't care about the Klingon thing one bit. I felt like you could have cut out all of those Klingon things, and the same thing with Burnham and what got her to be mutinied, or what got her to be convicted of mutiny. We are reported all that information anyway, so we don't need to see it happen in real time if you're going to report it to us. It's actually more interesting if you kind of give us little glimpses of it, as opposed to seeing it play out.
So you kind of could have, with how stilted their talk was, you could have sped it up to the point where they were speaking in a normal dialect. And that's the thing that, like, first off, I get why canonically, time-wise, they had to be Klingons because we're starting the Klingon War. But if they had set this after Next Generation, or what's the last one? After Voyager, or even after Nemesis, in the timeline, and all of this stuff was future technology. it could have been a whole new alien race, and it could have been a whole new war that they were trying to fight, or they could have stolen one from DS9 or Voyager, you know. But it just seems weird that they having Klingons been established for 40 years, 35 years as looking a specific way, to change it for, I think it's been retroactively explained that this is a different sect of Klingon. But to change it for this series, it just feels like they wanted to do both. You know, they wanted to present a new alien, but they also wanted the Klingons in there. And so somebody just said, like, well, why don't we just do both? Like, let's make the Klingons however we want.
And this is good evidence as to say why this is not really a Star Trek show. It's a space adventure show. And if you would just take the Klingons and don't call them Klingons, call them another alien in space, all of a sudden it feels fine, right?
Yeah.
Even the fact that the whole show tries to align itself with the Star Trek universe, and there are all of these well-placed references, and they get all the sounds right, and they get all of the techno-babble pretty well, and people deliver it really well. You don't need it. Like, if you just delete the word Star Trek from, and maybe Federation or whatever, even keep the Federation, who cares? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
It doesn't matter. It's just a word. I feel like this becomes one of the best science fiction shows on television. I should say science fiction adventure shows on television.
Well, okay, so one of the best like sci-fi series and like stories, but this gets into my problem with this. And Michael Burnham became a Mary Sue because the show was about her, and so she was the one who had to do everything. And I feel like if this had been established as like a Next Generation show where the crew wasn't there to serve her, but the crew was there and they each had their own part in it. And so, you know, there were episodes where, Burnham was the required one, but there were other episodes where it wasn't about her. Like, then I feel like it just would have been that much better, because we wouldn't have had to not force her into every position that we needed her to be in, but more to, like, we could have had other characters take those roles.
So to speak to the Mary Sue problem of Burnham, I think that if you look at Vulcans are basically Mary Sues as well. They are infinitely smart, infinitely strong. They seem to always know, they seem to be the wisest, I guess because they're the oldest.
Right.
You know, they're always the senior person on the group. The only thing that detracts from them is that they're not human, so they always have this kind of robotic kind of persona. But take that away, which is what Burnham is. Burnham is basically a Vulcan who is a human, or a full human. Now the full-on Mary Sue effect has taken effect, because you no longer have that slant of them being Vulcan and an alien and everybody making fun of them, you know? As we've moved further away from Spock, they just become kind of a joke. They become, you know, the hijinks, as it was. Like, oh, what's Tuvok going to say when I pulled his pants down? You know, like that kind of thing. So I think that's where the Mary Sue problem happens, because she is probably too smart. She seems to be smarter than the collective consciousnness of the whole Discovery, you know? And everybody's supposed to be super smart on that ship.
Right.
Like, Tilly is supposed to be as smart as Burnham, if not smarter, right? Because she's doing very specific, specialized things. But the problem is that Burnham also has the Janeway problem of always being the smartest person in the room. It doesn't feel like she ever really relies on anybody else's input or inspiration.
Right.
It always seems like she's the one that spits out a fully conceived idea, and everybody executes it. It's fine.
Well, and even if they don't execute it, she will then go behind their back, and she winds up being right. And everyone who said that it was a mistake has to apologize to her for, you know, contradicting her.
See, this is the problem with our society. Let me tell you this right now, because we have these heroes in our, not heroes literally, but narrative heroes. Michael Burnham is the hero of the show, right? She's the protagonist, as they say in school. And the whole concept of taking risks, and they even say this, I think, explicitly in the show, we have to take risks. or we're never going to get anywhere. We have to do X, Y, and Z. That's a big risk, but hopefully the outcome will be good. Here's the thing: what they teach you in school, and when they use examples of people taking risks, is that not every it's not just you taking a risk and then you're guaranteed a good outcome, right? And that's the problem with this character, is that she takes a lot of risks, but usually wins. And when you take, the more crazy the risk, the more dangerous the risk, with the most amount of possible negative consequences, the more likely you are to fail, right?
Right,
so,
yeah.
But she never fails.
Yeah, right.
Right? So that's the problem, is that you're teaching people, all I have to do is just take a risk. Doesn't matter how crazy the risk is.
Mm-hmm.
I'll probably come out on the other side just fine.
Right.
And that's not what happens.
Yes, in the first 2 episodes, she fails. Like, she gets her whole crew destroyed. But here's the thing, she was still right. That's the problem. People didn't listen to her, and it caused all of this. And so, she's blamed for everything, which I did not understand why Saru was so mad at her about the whole thing, because, if anyone gave thought to how things played out, they should have done what she said from the beginning and it would have been fine. But because they resisted, the crew was lost, or the captain was killed. And so many people died at the Battle of the Binary Stars. And she, she was charged with mutiny. But it wouldn't have happened because she was right. And this is going back to what you were saying about how she's the smartest person in the room. But on top of that, just the reason I'm saying that she's a Mary Sue, not only is she always right, not only does she, do all of her risks pay off, but everybody wants her. Lorca, hunted her down once he found out that she was there. Georgiou, didn't kill her because she was her daughter. There were so many conveniences that would have been fine if it was an ensemble show and not the Michael Burnham show.
Yep. And I think later in the show, it tends to more evenly distribute the load in terms of who comes up with the ideas and who does this and who does that.
Right.
But season 1, it's definitely the Michael Burnham show.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my biggest grand complaint. It's the Klingons, and that she's, as you said, the Mary Sue. And it gets old because she's not a very likable or interesting character. Mm-hmm. The only thing that makes her interesting is that she has all the answers.
Right.
And she's not really a broken character, only in that she's sad,
right,
and that she plays sad and dejected,
yeah,
but not broken. It almost would be better if we found out later why she was acting this way.
Yes.
And not new, And by the way, she didn't kill, what's her name? Georgia?
Yeah.
She didn't kill her. The Klingon killed her.
Right.
Well,
yeah, and she was trying to get her out so they could save her, but Saru was two things about this. They couldn't lock onto her body because they couldn't get a life signal. They couldn't get I forget what they said. But so she had to be left behind. But then in the 10th episode, 11th episode, she's being beamed out by herself, and she grabs onto Georgiou, and so they both get beamed over to Discovery, which shows that all she had to do was hey, beam just my general area, and she would hold the body, and they both would have beamed out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They needed her to die.
Right.
And that was how they came up with that.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. When you start getting in the nitty-gritty of how do we get around all of this technology where they can just beam anywhere from any place, and that stuff. We've talked about this before, where this is why the warp coils always go down and the shields are always down. Mm-hmm. And that because if you have this amazing, infinitely technological ship, there's no story, because you're just we'll hit the button,
right,
and that should fix it.
Well, right, but I mean, for this one, it's a very simple. Just do the Star Wars Obi-Wan Qui-Gon thing. Make them too far away from each other for her to get to Georgiou to be able to beam her back out.
Yeah.
It was but again, I think it's one of those things where they've written the script And it's a good script. You know, there wasn't really anything wrong with it, but it became a problem once you get to episode 11. And I think that they came up with a solution in episode 11 without thinking about the consequence of episode 1 and 2.
What are you talking about?
Just like, so in episode 1 and 2, you know, they're like, well, why can't they just be in the body? And it's like, oh, what if they can't find her body signature, you know, or her, you know, her whatever they said about it. I forget what it was. And because they couldn't get her body reading, like, they can't beam her out. Okay, great. Yeah, that makes technobabble sense. So we'll make that be the thing. And then in episode 10 and 11, they're like, well, how do we get Georgiou back on the ship? And it's like, what if while she's getting beamed and they've got her body signature tracked, like, she just quickly runs over,
right?
You know, so they come up with these two solutions, which both are fine in a bubble, but because of the two of them in the same series about the same character, basically, like, you know, then it becomes a, well, why did it work the second time but not the first time?
No, you're right. And I'm okay with a little bit of that. Every single Star Trek show has had inconsistencies, you know.
Sure.
And sometimes you can write novels and technical manuals about all this stuff, but eventually it just breaks down because it's not real.
Right.
And I'm okay with it. I just think that once you come across it, once you encounter it too many times, it starts to ping at you, and you're like, well, this is just starting to not make sense. Right?
Well, yeah, and I'm fine with it when it's kind of standalone, but when you have a hurdle that you can't overcome, that you can later overcome without any kind of explanation, it's like, well, then why couldn't you before? You know, and that's kind of where my problem always lies. Because you're right, like, you can poke holes through any of this stuff if you start to, like, kind of give it any kind of deep analysis, but it just, because it was in the same series, in the same season, about the same character, you know, and originally this was watched, 12 weeks, if not more, apart. So it's kind of one of those things where it's a little bit forgotten, but watching it within the course of 4 days.
Well, it's still familiar, though. Like that thing where the Terran Georgiou, where that's how Burnham gets her out, is by hugging her. That's familiar. We've seen that before.
Right.
In Star Trek.
That's true.
So that was okay. You know, the technobabble, you know, there are always problems with reading the buffer signal
Biosigns?
pattern.
Maybe
yeah, or whatever.
Maybe that's what it is.
Look, nerd. Just trying to do a podcast here. And, you know, I mean, like, that's also familiar, where we can't get a lock on her. She's just too far away, you know, that kind of thing. So there's all these, you know, that's the warp coils going down, and that's the you know, the shields are down, that kind of thing.
Right.
You always have to somehow handicap your ship or your technology so a plot can happen, you know.
Speaking of shields going down and that kind of thing, there was one scene that I was just completely confused by over who was shooting who and what was happening, and that was with the Georgiou Lorca standoff in that hallway where they were shooting at some and the shields were up, but then they started shooting again, and like it was an aerial view. It's like episode 13, I think. So it was near the end, and like I understood what was happening just because, you know, it's a traditional fight between the two and one is winning, one is losing. But the details of it, I could not figure out, like, who had the upper hand in it and like what the reversal was or whatever. Like, do you remember this scene?
Yeah, I feel this way about kind of the whole show, is that there's always some kind of fighting set piece where, you know, Burnham is supposed to be a Vulcan ninja, you know. Mm-hmm. And so is Georgiou. She's supposed to be a Terran ninja, because they're all, like, they can all fight, and that always comes into play. And I'm okay with both of them being able to handle themselves. I just don't need a 2 or 3 minute long set piece of them fighting. I feel like it's not what I'm there for.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And your science fiction, you don't need it. We know who's going to win. Mm-hmm. You know? Like, I understand that action movies always have some sort of kinetic set piece, whether it's in a spaceship or people fighting each other. That's the part that separates it, I think, the most from Star Trek, is all of the hand-to-hand combat stuff. You know, used to be you do the palm to the nose thing,
double fist,
you flip, you double fist on the back, and you're done, and we can move on with the plot.
Right.
and not the case anymore.
Yeah.
It seems like. Which, all right. I mean, I feel like if the choreography was just super interesting, in that Burnham is a Vulcan ninja, and they have their own little martial art, and that's why she's able to whoop so much ass. That would be interesting, but it kind of just turns into kicking and punching.
Right. Well, and it's the jump cuts for me. You know, like you go back to the Jackie Chan movies or the older Japanese, combat films. Like it's like they plant the camera, and then they just do the choreography, and that's the exciting part. You know, that's what. Or even Princess Bride with like the sword fighting. You know, there are so few cuts because of how much they practiced and like how much it's been choreographed. And so you get to see this whole fight, and it's amazing. But when there's so many jump cuts in the fight, it's disorienting, but B, it's also like you kind of stop caring, you know, especially like from anybody who knows behind the scenes stuff. It's like, if there's 17 cuts in the scene, then there were probably 17 takes, and these are the best shots from it. Or like they set up the camera in a different spot, and they did like beats 3 through 5 with the camera there, and then they stopped.
Right. Well, I think that speaks to the fact that Jackie Chan, who I didn't know was in The Princess Bride, interesting fun fact. Jackie Chan is a martial artist first, and that's it. He's not really an actor.
There is no second.
There's no second. But, you know, these actors are just people who show up and can memorize lines, and there's only so much, you know, it's the same argument as why it's very expensive to do a musical episode with these actors, is because they're not musicians, and you have to teach them all of these things. And so as expensive as this show is, and we're getting to that in a second, it just is to have them play out an entire sequence uncut would be so expensive and so time consuming for them to do it. And also when you're not a martial artist, you're not fast. Like if you just whip your hand around and that's the end of the shot and the whole shot is 23 frames, you can make that look fast. But it's kind of the thing in The Matrix when you see the characters running like upstairs, downstairs, across whatever. They're running as fast as they possibly can, and it just kind of still feels like, are they running? Like it doesn't feel super kinetic, you know, because they're actors, you know, and they even train for 6, 9, 12, whatever months to do this stuff. But same thing with these guys, you know, they only have 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever to shoot an episode, and they can't spend all their time trying to train and become martial artists to make it look really slick. And so they have to cut it up. And, you know, that's another reason why they shouldn't be doing it, is why are you trying to fit this crap into a science fiction show? It's not really necessary. Yeah, do 1 or 2 little quick moves. You know, that's the whole genius of the Mulkin neck pinch. It's like, which I think tries to happen. That comes into play. I don't know if it's in season 1 or the latter seasons. But that's great. Like, it's like you take them out with one fell swoop and they're on the ground.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And done. But anyway, like, as expensive as the show is, and let's talk about that for a second.
Okay. Because
this is the slickest looking show ever. And it's so weird that it's for a Star Trek show. Because, you know, I think that Next Gen was a super slick looking show in the 80s and early 90s, right? Because that's basically, they had the biggest budget of any television show, I think.
Right, yeah. I think it was like $120,000 an episode.
Oh, no, I think it was like $1 million
yeah.
an episode. Oh, I see. You were adjusting for inflation.
Yeah.
Negative inflation.
Right.
But now, like, I would not expect it to look this good. Like, everything looks so, like, finished. You know, if you think about Voyager, and those were probably the best Star Trek effects, computer effects, because before they were all kind of models and they had a specific look to them because that's the only way they could do it. Right. With DS9 and, you know, and Next Gen. But they kind of started dipping their toe into the digital realm with Voyager, and it just started to get really good. You know, and this is the culmination of that, is like, how slick is this? And also they're kind of pulling from the J.J. Abrams look and all that stuff. There's quite a few lens flares. But it looks so good, dude.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think a big part of that too was just Paramount. I mean, it's been what at the time had been like 15 years since the last episode of like
Enterprise?
Yeah, since Enterprise, and that was pretty lackluster. Like that was the only series since the first series to get canceled. And I think that's kind of what happened here is like they were like, okay, let's bring back Star Trek and let's bring it back in a big way. And they pretty much did. I think the struggle with having the show be about one character and consequently, having her have to be the hero and the savior and everything, was really its biggest detriment. Just because everything else about it, like the story was great, the special effects were great, the acting you look at was it not Lucius Malfoy, Jason Isaacs, and Doug Jones, and like just everybody, they're really bringing it, and so like I think that this show they really put that extra love and care into it, just because they wanted it to be kind of the renaissance of Star Trek. And obviously it succeeded.
Yeah, I feel like this is the best produced show of any of them. Even, I know that Strange New Worlds, we always talk about how good it is. I think that's probably the best Star Trek show on television. Mm-hmm. I'll say this is the best science fiction adventure on television.
Okay.
Because I think Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, scratches the Star Trek itch a little bit better. It just feels a little bit more in the same family than this does.
Yes.
But I like watching this show better than I do Strange New Worlds. I feel like it's just two different, things. It's like we were talking about earlier. What food could you eat over and over again indefinitely?
Right.
And, it couldn't be either one. I would need to go back. I would need to alternate, just to cleanse the palate, as it were.
Yeah.
Because they're two different shows.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because, like, there's orchestral music the whole time of the show. Like, it's just wall-to-wall music, which normally would be a detriment. But I think for some reason it works for this show. Like, they need it. There's very few times where it's just two people and they're talking and there's nothing supporting it. Mm-hmm. Normally, I would say I want to hear the room. I don't want all of the negative space to be taken up by music.
Right.
But it seems to work. It seems to be okay. And it just the whole milieu of the show seems to just meld really well together. Mm-hmm. No pun intended. And I think that if you look at how much they spent, like all of the visual effects, like every shot has some sort of visual effect in it. I have no idea what they're doing with Baru, if he is somehow augmented by effects or if that's all makeup. I don't know how much makeup they put on Tim Cook to make him look like that, but it's got to be a lot. It's got to be like hours of makeup to put it on and then to take it off again.
Who's Baru and who's Tim Cook?
Baru is the tall dude that walks like he's always waving a fart away.
Saru. Okay.
Saru, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's Aunt Baru. Where's Aunt Baru from? Oh, that's from Star Wars. That's hilarious. Yeah, Saru. Yeah, Tim Cook is the leader of Apple. Go Google him, and you'll see that Saru is a direct descendant of Tim Cook.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. Who's Baru and who's Tim Cook? I don't know if I made the joke better or worse. Well, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's one of my favorite parts of the show.
Okay, so
my
you want to
favorite
start to get into like more specifics now that we've kind of covered the season?
We can. I mean, I tried to watch one of those recaps so I could have a little bit more concentrated season one in my brain while we were doing this. So I have some things, but I mean, do you have things?
Yeah,
like very specific
I've got
things?
a couple ones. Just a couple like interesting continuity errors, but.
Oh, okay. Well, let me tell you that. Let me tell my favorite part, and you tell me some of the other stuff. So my favorite part was his name Ash.
Yeah,
Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That whole idea of he's actually a Klingon that has been surgically altered to be a human.
Uh-huh.
You know, that I'm getting that right? Like it wasn't just they did a brain transplant.
Oh yeah, no. Like they fully. That's what they were talking about. Like they flayed his skin,
seems
destroyed
like,
his body. Yeah.
Yeah, the wrong way to go.
Yep.
You know, like it's probably easier to add a bunch of bones and stuff to a dude and height than it is to like chip away where it's just like this weird Pinocchio version.
Well, and they
Klingon.
took out the redundant organs. Yeah.
Right. I feel like, I guess why wouldn't they have done this earlier? But it makes a lot of sense because they've set up that, you know, surgically you can do a lot of stuff in Star Trek. So pretty fun. I just liked the concept that he was. They also put in Ash's personality and memories and things. They didn't just make him another, like just someone in disguise, basically.
Right.
And I felt like they didn't linger on that concept too much. It was just enough to having him be, oh, that's crazy. And that like, when he does the Klingon speech as Ash, it's like perfect. It sounds exactly like the actor. I don't know if the guy who played the original Klingon is the same actor. I never looked that up.
It is.
As Ash.
I did
Is
look
the
it
same
up.
guy?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, that makes it, I guess, less impressive
Right.
that he was able to.
Yeah. Emulate the voice. Right.
It's kind of like it's kind of like when you see Seth MacFarlane on The Tonight Show or something, and he does Peter from Family Guy, and you're like, wow, that's impressive. He can do him really well. It's like, no,
Yeah.
he does it normally.
Right, he is
came
the
up
guy.
with
Yeah.
it.
No,
Yeah.
a better example is Josh Gad when he talks about how like his kids are like, can you not read it in Olaf's voice this time? And he's like, no, like,
Ouch.
I know.
Yeah. What were you saying? Oh, yeah. So I just felt like that was cool when he is able to just basically personify the guy, the Klingon. It's just like, oh, he just becomes him. You know, it was interesting to watch. What I didn't like is that everybody's mad at him later when they find out that, oh, you're basically a brainwashed person. You know, we fixed the whole thing where you're a murderous weirdo Klingon guy. That's fixed. That's done. You don't have to worry about that anymore. And we know that you weren't really responsible, that you were just kind of a huge victim here, but we're still mad at you. You know?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't like that crap. That's crappy to me. It's like, that's not really his fault.
right. And I did kind of appreciate how they handled it, but it was also very much like the Hammer moment where he was nodding at Uhura, where he's like Ash goes to the mess hall and he's like eating by himself, and Tilly just very politely excuses herself from the table where she is, and she sits down next to him, and then the cyborg girl comes and joins him too, and she's like, hi. And then like 3 or 4 more people like pull up chairs to sit around him, and like they're like at the single like 2 top. So they're like, can you kind of scoot over a little bit? You know, and it was just, it felt like we had to cut away because by the end of it, just everybody would be like circled around him. But the other part too that I felt was really good. I mean, about recognizing that yes, it's not his fault, but Stamets's husband still died by his hand, you know, and like they ran into each other in the hall, and Stamets was like, does it keep you awake at night? Like, do you have a hard time concentrating knowing that you killed an innocent man? You know, and he's like,
Yeah, he should have said, I didn't kill him. That
right.
wasn't the other guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
that
I keep trying to tell you guys this. Like, I wasn't like pulling the strings on that one. That was another dude, you know? Like, that's the thing is like, why doesn't anybody get it? You know, like I get it. You know what I mean? Like, why don't you understand that? Like, that wasn't me. I didn't do that. You know,
right.
Like when Geordi was like brainwashed by I think it was the Romulans. You know, there weren't 3 or 4 episodes of everybody being mad at Geordi when he was causing all the problems. You know what I mean? It's like we understood that you were brainwashed and being controlled by other people, but I don't know. That bugs me. I feel like that's a bit lazy in writing.
Sure.
If he was trying to do it and he was like, he agreed with the Klingons, he's like, yeah, I could have stopped him, but I didn't. that would have been something. But he wasn't even awake.
Right. But there is also that scene in the in Burnham's quarters where like it's right after the conflict with the mirror, whatever his name was, Vo'q. He's talking about it in first person. He's like, but then, I remembered who he is, and I remember that's who I was, and Stamets found him, and that's why I had to kill him. So like, as long as Vo'q was in there, like, he didn't really feel bad about it. It was once that personality was completely removed, where he was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? But I mean, it's kind of also what Michael said. Like, yeah, I get that it wasn't you, but it was your hands that were squeezing around my neck.
Yeah, I still don't buy it.
All right.
I still don't buy it. I'd be so mad. Like, it wasn't me. I didn't do anything. And here's the thing about the whole Vo'q, like the doctor character, the Klingon doctor character who's hot for Vo'q. Mm-hmm. She wants to have sex with Vo'q as Ash.
Right.
And I feel like Ash would have been like, you're going to kill me
right.
if we try and do that. Like, I'm like curious.
Well, but he also has like either hallucinations or flashbacks to them doing it.
Yeah, I do wonder about that. They never really quite explain that because it looks like she is having sex with Ash, right? Before he's killed.
Yeah, which looks a lot like sex, which I wouldn't expect Klingons to like have sex in a sex-like way.
How would you expect them to have sex?
Like full-on hard wrestling, like she,
Like, yeah, it's very physical, that type of thing.
Yeah, not in like a caressing, sensual way, but in like a, they talk about it all the time on DS9. Like, you're sore for days afterward.
Yeah, I guess that's true. They kind of invented that for DS9, though, because Deanna Troi and Worf were, I'm assuming, were having sex, and she never goes to Beverly. No, she still works out with Beverly,
Maybe that's why.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's why they're doing all that stretching.
Right? Gotta stay loose and limber and keep those.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay. I'm with you that it seems like it would be a lot more violent, but not like murdering each other. I mean, are they?
Right.
Is that their version of edging?
Yeah. My safe word is don't stop.
So confusing. But it's unclear if he was imagining himself as Ash because there's this weird dichotomy of the two personalities in his head, or if she was having sex with Ash before Vo'q became Ash.
Right.
So I guess you're not supposed to necessarily know about it, but it was interesting.
I don't know how much effort it would be for you, but it would be so funny if you chirped every time we said Vo'q.
I'll try. We'll give it a shot.
Okay.
Give it a shot. But yeah, I felt like the whole, up to the point where they all know and they're all mad at him for being Vo'q, I felt like that was fun. That was very novel.
Yeah.
To me.
Well, so going back to like knowing that it was Vo'q from the beginning, when Lorca and Mud find him in the Klingon prison, everything he says in that episode is a double meaning. And I like just I was too far past it, going back to my computer to like write down the notes to write down what he said.
You mean all the stuff that he says when they're in the cell comes back in the latter episode when they're doing the time thing?
No, like it, everything that Ash says in that episode.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Right.
It was actually him as Vo'q, but like he says it in a way that it works as him being human too.
Got it. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that stuff though. That's for people who watch it a second time.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It can only be for people who watch it a second time, which I guess is fine. That's fine. But, in terms of it being a complete, wholesome art form, right? You shouldn't be putting in stuff that you can only appreciate the second time, I guess.
Oh no, I would completely disagree with that. It's when it doesn't work the first time and you have to watch it again. You know, you're like, why did he say that? Oh, I guess that's why.
Yeah,
But like this
right,
was,
that's true.
you know,
That's true.
This was totally offhand. Like the lines still worked for what they were, but then watching it again, knowing that hidden meaning, it's like, oh, okay. You know, it's like Lorca having to put in all the eye drops. Like, you know, you're like,
Right,
oh,
yeah.
he's got a sickness, and then it's like, oh no, it's because he's from the mirror universe. Which same thing. Like I think that them being from the mirror universe was leaked before the season came out, and that's so disappointing because, like, even when he's in the agonizer, you know, and the guy says say his name, and he kind of dances around it over and over and over until he gets out and then kills the guy by using the defibrillator on his head, and then he says Ava. Her name was Ava. Like, it's such a good mic drop, you know, like mic drop twist before the episode ends.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe I could have used a little bit more of Ash walking around bumping into things, or some kind of consequence of being put into a body that's half the size of your old body, you know, that kind of thing. Like, that would have been interesting. I guess you can technobabble that away, but this whole sense that you're in a much smaller form factor,
Right?
like that would take a while to get, like, as you know, toddlers, you don't really ever get used to that until you're like 18, you know? So there would be an adjustment period.
Yeah.
So, but they didn't have time. I guess they didn't have time. And they really wanted it to be a reveal, right? Same thing with Loken?
Yeah,
Locus?
but they really could have. Like, they could have just had him stumble like once or twice in the next episode, and just, you know, kind of have somebody say like, "Are you okay?" You know, and just say like, "I you know, they did a number on me in the prison. Like, I'm still just kind of getting used to, you know, I'm still recovering, basically."
Right. Why do my bones itch?
Right. Yeah, I feel it's a little telling.
It's too far? Okay.
Yeah, so the reason why I said that this is what Picard should have been is because every episode, I mean, we've kind of already been singing its praises, but every episode is kind of standalone. Like, I feel like we can't watch it out of order, but we can watch each episode by itself and get the story that it's telling at the beginning that it resolves at the end.
Yeah, it doesn't really reset either, though.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't. I don't think you can watch it out of order, but you can watch an episode and then leave it alone. And Picard, you just can't. Like, every episode does not start with a conflict that it resolves at the end. We're just getting new information in each episode, or not, and we're just watching them run from point A to point B before the episode ends. And we have to wait until the next episode.
Yeah, and I feel like every episode of Discovery, there's the episodic heavy, right? There's something that they have to do, they have to accomplish, that they outline very well, which Picard didn't really have.
Exactly.
Picard had the overarching thing.
Yeah.
But every episode seemed like filler in Picard, in the sense of we have to get from point A to point B. We're kind of in the middle of point A to point B for most of the show. And so it just feels like it's kind of floating around without any kind of anchor.
Right.
But Discovery had that, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. What are some of the nitpicky things that you wanted to talk about?
So just two of them they're about like units. So do you remember the original series episode where we learn about Spock's second set of eyelids, and that's why he was able to like not be blinded by the blast that they gave him?
Yeah, I think we saw that episode.
Yeah. So they talk about how it has like the brightness of 10 million candles or something like that. And that was the unit of measurement for brightness until we got into like more electrical ways of measuring light, and then it became lumens. And in this episode, or in this series, in this season, they talked about something having lumens instead of candles. So we went to lumens, back to candles for a period of time, and then we went back into lumens. And then another one, this is like your complaint about Next Generation, how they talk about how something is like 10 million kilometers or 1,000 kilometers or whatever. But in this, they talked about how things were several AUs away. And so I was like, oh, all right. So we're using AUs now.
Which seems like such an unspecific unit of measurement, it would seem like gradations of light years is better, I guess.
But
or
it was
start
only a
speaking in
couple
light
AUs,
seconds.
you know. So like, and an AU is significantly smaller than a light year.
That's true, but I've heard people talk, I don't know in the show, but they say light minutes and light seconds. Like, for example, I think the sun is 8 light minutes away. And that
Interesting.
seems way
Okay.
more standardized to me than using an AU. I mean, I like the AU. I like that they're reaching out and they're doing different stuff.
Right.
They're not doing kilometers. But yeah, I feel like it does kind of lack some cohesion in the tech
Right.
a little bit. Technobabble.
It'd be kind of funny if it just, depends on who you ask. Like it's an AU, it's a light meter, a light meter, a light minute.
A light meter. It's like, how much more confusing can we be?
Right. Yeah, that's not distance, that's time. How?
A light meter.
Yeah. That would be crazy if distance was based on time and time was based on distance.
I know. It sounds like the most confusing universe you can accidentally come into.
Right?
It's like worse than that race that only speaks in metaphor.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, you're doing so much calculating in your head.
Well, you wouldn't be able to. I mean, it'd be so small. Like a light meter would be like an infinitesimally small
Right.
amount of time.
Well, yeah, but that's how fast the reaction is. So this was the first series that had profanity in it, and the thing, like, I would have been so mad at Star Trek and Paramount and like the directors and everything in this, because the first profanity is in episode 5, and it happens twice, like back to back. And so like you could, since there's not really like anything horribly graphically violent, except for maybe like Voq's surgery, which I think it shows briefly in like the second episode, you could make it to episode 5 as a family. You're like, great, new Star Trek. Like we used to watch when we were younger. Let's all watch it together. And like the grandkids or the kids coming in, the younger kids coming in, and like you get to episode 5 and they drop the F-bomb twice in like 30 seconds. And it's like, okay, well, I guess we're done watching this. And so it was very aggravating to me just as a parent, and like how Star Trek has been. I know Star Trek has been on public television before now, so like I get that there's that difference. But it would have been, yeah, it would have been super irritating. And I don't know if that happened, if there was anybody who really complained about it, but just the fact that there wasn't any advanced warning, because usually like when it says language at the top and you've been watching a show up until now, you're like, okay, so there may be like a bitch or something.
Yeah. Well, this is another reason why it's not really a Star Trek show, in the sense that, like, meaning that if you just delete the word Star Trek from it, it becomes, I think, a better show somehow. Like I think that when you shed all of the baggage of previous iterations of Star Trek and just watch it for what it is, I think it's better. At least it was for me. When I stopped thinking of it and looking at it in the light of being a Star Trek show, it got better. Like I was just riveted in the show and in the adventure than I was trying to get something out of it in a Star Trek way.
Right. Well, and at least for this season, I think the big reason for that is because it did follow one character. It was the first Star Trek show that was not an ensemble, and I think that threw people off, if not rubbed them the wrong way.
Yeah. Can we talk about the spore drive for a second?
Yeah.
So the spore drive, I like this concept that there's this other way that isn't subspace to travel through the universe. I don't understand the mycelia network. I don't get it. I don't get how that's physics to me. I don't understand that concept. I feel like they took something that's interesting in a biological sense and applied it to a physics type of idea. And maybe I wasn't paying enough attention. I don't know. But it seemed like, why not try like a dark matter drive of some kind? And I know that dark matter plays a role in the show, but some kind of weird physics thing that pops up that sounds familiar, but isn't something biological, because it felt like, spores, mushrooms, all that stuff, it's biological. I don't understand how there can be this interdimensional thing that can exist that comes from, fungi. Mm-hmm. I don't get it. Like I couldn't. It gets me every time. I wish the spore drive was something different drive.
I gotcha. Yeah, I mean the only thing that I can say about it is, like, I don't know if you've ever seen fungus or mycelium like get to its food or go through a maze. Like, it's
Does it spin around a couple times, disappear, and then appear where it needs to be?
yeah, and then appears at the end. Yeah, and so like
Yeah.
I get how they thought that this would be a good thing to apply to a spaceship.
What if when it spins around, that the inertial dampeners can't do anything with that, and so every time they jump, the whole crew is just plastered against the wall, like motion sick.
Right?
It's like, oh, I hate this thing, but it's so convenient.
Mm-hmm. Oh, but just that the even though it doesn't have a central brain, like it is able to go through any kind of obstacles and find the most direct route. Well, whether it's to food or it's always to food, whether it's to the center of the maze or if it's across in a certain area. But like, so there is.
But is it a metaphor that they're like? Is this all one giant metaphor in terms of how this particular interdimensional network works, and fungi and mycelia? Is that the idea, or is it literally? I mean, they talk about spores, so
Right.
I think they're being literal.
Well, yeah, and they had to go to a planet to generate more of the spores. So yes, it's a physical thing, but I think the idea is almost like all of the mycelia in the universe is connected. And so they're kind of piggybacking off of those mycelia roots, ROOTS and ROUTES.
Yeah, but how? Like, I
Right.
feel like that's the part that's missing. Is why? Is there some sort of weird interdimensional quantum connection with spores that was seeded in the universe at the very beginning of time, and that's why it works, and that spores are actually all interdimensional and all universal, and they're not actually endemic to planet Earth, like that kind of stuff? Like this idea that all spores on any kind of planet are the same, and that's why they're all connected, that makes more sense to me. I don't know. I wanted more information. I feel like I'm in a deficit of information at this point.
Right.
And I want, like, I could look up how warp drive works, and warp drive was like based on a theory back in the time. Like, it wasn't something that was invented by Roddenberry. It was like a real thing, and they're still trying to make one, But this whole, like, I don't think they're ever going to try and make a spore drive.
Right. Yeah. No, there's nothing about how it works. It just says, like...
Were you doing the thing? Were you looking up something on the internet, and that's why you stopped talking?
What? No. Who does that?
I hate it when you do that.
Sorry.
I hate it.
I felt like it was pertinent to the podcast, so... That is very much magic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that anyone could possibly say that it's all fake, so I don't understand what your problem is. It could be, all of it is mumbo jumbo, right? So
Yeah.
why is this the thing?
But, but the whole thing about Star Trek is that it takes the science that we know and it makes like one, maybe two steps farther. It doesn't take science that we know and then make some kind of harebrained theory.
Yeah. It's not taking a general nugget of science and extrapolating to the point where it becomes usable. It's just taking something, like somebody heard a podcast on how amazing funguses are,
Right.
or fungi is, and it's like, oh, how about that? Mm-hmm. All right, well, I want to talk about one other thing.
Okay.
I want to talk about the robot lady on the bridge of Discovery.
The Carol Kane of Discovery? Okay.
Yes. Who is, hypothetically, one of the most interesting characters on the bridge, even if you take away Saru, who is,
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Let me mention this last thing about Saru, because I feel like you're going to be able to stick on this without forgetting what you're talking about. It would have been such a neat little, like, not an Easter egg, but just a nice little reference if the Kelpians in the mirror universe had their little ganglia up all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
I mean, I guess why wouldn't they?
right.
You know, like so gross. I hated that section of the show where little things come out. Ugh, gross.
All right.
It'd be funny if every time Michael saw it, she was like,
Oh God. I'm your friend. Please just put those away.
She gets in one of those fisherman's hats that you put on.
For your birthday?
You look great. These are great. Never seen you look this good.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. So the robot lady, who I thought was a robot, and I think I am given no information in the first season that she isn't a robot. Right?
No.
Like,
I mean, we're given almost no information about her.
Right. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is like an android type of person, right? Thing. And I'm like, I didn't know you could do this back pre-Enterprise, pre-original series, like robot types of stuff. And I was fine with it. I didn't care that, they didn't have these in the original series, so therefore they can't have them in this one. Like, I'm not in that camp of people. But I was thinking, what is this? How are they going to explain this? There is a robot who doesn't talk a lot. She just kind of says stuff, so I thought she was more of like an embodied Siri,
Right.
Where she can do the things that she's supposed to do, but isn't a sentient being. But having seen where that character goes, I retract my gripe about her not being explored on the first show. It's more of a gripe that she was on the bridge, kind of teasing us every single time, but they never even refer to her. I don't even know her name in the first season.
Is it Aaron?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Like I feel like she was referenced twice, maybe 3 times. And again, it was just in passing, and I was like, are they saying Aaron? Is it like Aaron? And so anyway.
Well, it's like it's a what do you call it when every letter stands for
right.
a word?
Yeah, it's D.A.R.Y.L.
I don't think her name was D.A.R.Y.L. No. D.A.R.Y.L. Was that even like a movie that anybody saw?
I did.
Yeah. Yeah. So but I have to say, like, I kept taking notes of like little nitpicky things, but they didn't matter. As time went on, I was like, these don't matter. This is like just a good show, I mean, there's a lot of tropes in it that I don't like. Like there was one thing where Paul is in the mycelial network, like he's in the Nexus, basically.
Right.
And he's disoriented and he's trying to chase somebody, and they're doing the thing where you're chasing somebody and they're always just rounding the bend so you can't see who they are, and they do this for 2 or 3 minutes. I'm just like, why do you keep like I'm a broken record about this stuff where they take a recognized worn out trope and do it on a modern show. I'm sure you don't remember what I was talking about, but this kind of stuff, like, it just sets me off.
Right.
I'm just so tired of it. Like, you don't have to do that. Come up with something more creative.
But I will say, that guy's death, like, that was
out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. I was so shocked.
I know. I was like, well, he's coming back. I knew it because he was like a main character. Although they didn't bring him back, I don't think.
Wait, so he does come back?
Shut up. No, he comes back in the first season.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, he does. Because he's back. He's in the mycelial network.
He's in the okay, yes, he came back, but he tells Paul, he's like, I'm dead.
Right. I didn't think that was the last time we were going to see him. Like, I knew there was going to be something where, like, that can't be it for that character.
Like, just his death,
it's like
mean?
His death. Yeah. I was like, there's no way. Right?
Yeah, but I
guess that was the point.
I mean, and then he did show up, like, a little bit later, like, Paul was holding his dead body.
Right.
And then he saw him in the network, in the Nexus.
In the Nexus. The negative, I'm going to work on it. I'll work on it, get back to you. So another thing about the Mirror Universe. So I understand that this is a reference. The Mirror Universe is a reference that they keep bringing back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Oh, I have another question about that. But anyway, this whole sense that I understand that in another universe that there can be doubles, or just rather the indigenous person in that network or in that universe who is exactly like you. I understand that that can happen. The part that is totally implausible is that they would all be in the same place as the other universe and kind of have the same relationships for the most part. Like they'd all be in the same vicinity of the universe. That's like the implausible part for me, is that they managed to make their way into some sort of Federation, whatever they call it, alliance, Terran, whatever. They're all in the kind of the same position. They just call it something different.
Right.
I feel like we need another way to explain that.
And I mean, they kind of did with the Lorca, Burnham, Georgiou triangle. Lorca saying like this is all destiny, and how like it doesn't matter what universe we're in, we're all fated to be together type thing. But
yeah, too lazy. If that's true, that's lazy.
Exactly.
It's a little lazy for me.
Yeah. It's just a lazy way of saying this is meant to be.
Right.
Speaking of, I did like that moment where he's like, how poetic that an inventor is killed by his own creation. And he's like, just kidding. I hate poetry, and just shoots him.
Who are you talking about?
Lorca killed Mirror Stamets. He opens up the floor to show him the spore drive underneath him, and he's going to drop him in. Which also, I don't know. I don't think he comes back in any of the 5 seasons, but given how he dies by dropping into the spore drive, it also kind of makes sense that he would just be caught in the mycelial network. And so there could be some way for him to be freed.
You can always bring him back.
Yeah.
It's the Nexus, though. He's not going to want to leave.
Right. Right. So...
The Nexus?
Yeah. Negasus?
Oh. No.
Yeah, that's a bad unicorn. That's an evil unicorn.
He's got a huge mustache or a goatee.
Right.
But it's all a rainbow.
Again, nice subtle reference, giving Sarek the goatee when he was mind melding with Burnham.
Is that a reference?
Yeah, because Mirror Spock had a goatee. Like the very first.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Got it. Yeah. Also, Clint Howard.
Yes. Yeah.
He's in the show.
Right.
So
yeah, I meant to look that up. Like, how many is that now?
Criteria met.
Right. At least for the series.
Is he in Picard? I think
he is. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about it. I think we talked about it.
I think he's in season 3.
And he has to be the same character. Like,
that would be so funny. All series, he's the same character.
Even though he's older.
Right.
Somehow. Some sort of, maybe he falls into the mycelial network and time travels.
Yeah, just ages and ages and ages, yeah. All right, so just really quick with the wrap up on the mycelial network. So everything is explained about the mycelial network and how like it's all connected between physics and biology and blah, blah, blah. Except for how Discovery gets into the mycelial network.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
So, they discover the mycelial network. They figure out how to tap into the mycelial network, but how do they get a ship into this mycelial network? And that's the part where it's not even technobabbled into explanation. It's just
they just do it. Yeah.
I escaped somehow. Let's go.
Yeah. And they don't I think they only have one, right? There's only one spore drive by the end of season 1.
Yeah, there were 2, and one of the ships was destroyed. Oh, no. It wasn't destroyed. They jumped, and it destroyed the
never
crew.
Came back or something?
Yeah. And that's where they found the tardigrade and blah, blah, blah.
That's why they never say tardigrade, do they? It just looks like one?
No, they do.
Do they say tardigrade? Oh, okay.
Oh, no, you might be right. They might say that it looks like a tardigrade, but tardigrades are so small. Yeah, that might have been what they said.
That was like tardigrades made the news at a certain point, and I wonder if that coincides when this show was being written. It's like, oh, these are hot. Tardigrades are hot. Let's use that. Tardigrades are hot. Let's use that.
It's just kind of a synergistic thing where they didn't want to explain what a tardigrade was. So, like, they just reached out to some news channel, and they're like, hey, can you write, like, some article about tardigrade science?
Wow. That would be impressive if that's, that's how they did that.
So, for sure, at least in my mind, this was proper Star Trek, like through and through. I think that,
Yeah, I think it was.
yeah, I mean, it checked off the third criteria, like in every episode.
Leave him out of this.
I wonder
That's
if I
two in
will
one
ever
episode. How
be
about
expecting it, or if it will ever stop being funny.
Well, no and no.
And there was a decent amount of sci-fi that was presented in a unique way. I mean, I am not counting the spore drive. Like, that is magic 100%, at least in my mind.
I mean, I give it credit for being something different, that they were trying to find another form of propulsion or
Oh, sure.
a way to get around the universe. Like I like that concept because we kind of got maybe stuck in the rut of warp drive, you know?
Yes, and the
And that
subspace drive.
warp drive
Yeah.
is kind of slow at this point for Star Trek, you know?
Yeah, but just the fact that there's no explanation on how they get into the spore drive, like the
Right.
spore, the mycelial network.
It seems to be magic. It seems to be. I mean, we start off the show with them not really knowing or understanding how it works.
Right.
They just know that it kind of works.
Well, and then they know by using the tardigrade or something biological to finish the connection, they can start making it work. But
Right.
there's nothing about why that works.
Yeah, I felt so sorry for the tardigrade.
I know. That was sad.
Very sad. But he was fine at the end. That was nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it has a lot of novel science fiction in there, and there's quite a few moral and ethical. Even the first, the first or two episodes have pretty big moral conundrum for Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a proper Star Trek season.
Yeah. And almost every episode, I think maybe 2 out of 15 were not proper Star Trek. But that would only be because of like the sci-fi aspect, not because of the moral or ethical dilemma.
Oh, I gotta say, we didn't talk about this at all, but the Harry Mudd episode.
The timed loop?
Yeah,
Oh.
like that was very interesting. Like that was a new kind of take on doing a time loop episode where it's almost like cause and effect, sort of. Well, very similar to cause and effect, but a different take on it. And I felt like that was novel, but also familiar, and also a fun way to do that kind of episode. Like it wasn't really a bottle episode, but it kind of was. And it, I liked, that was probably my favorite episode of the whole season. I forgot that we did not talk about that, but I just wanted to say that very quickly.
Well, and what was nice about it was like there were things that were planted before that episode, which made it like there wasn't any like, really, come on. Like Paul was outside of the time loop because of the spore drive and like altering his DNA. And as he said, like it's everything in the universe, like everything at once, from the creation to the end. So it made sense that he would be fully aware of the time loop. Made sense,
Right.
in quotes.
Yeah.
But the thing that threw me off about that episode was how Burnham and Ash were able to like start remembering things from the loops, unless it was like they had to start remembering things because like Burnham then asked him to dance. There was more acceptance as the loops went on, and so they were able to get farther in each loop, and that just seemed like why did they suddenly remember?
Right. I think it was, we couldn't watch the first 15 minutes
Every time,
like,
right?
over and over and
right,
over, right?
Yeah.
So they did some abridging for the sake of, they do this actually in whatever that Tom Cruise movie is called now. They keep changing the name every couple of years. I think it was Tomorrow is Tomorrow.
Right.
Yesterday. Yesterday's Tomorrow was whatever it was. There was a time loop one. And they did that as well, where they cut out all the part where he has to explain what's going on to everybody every single time,
Well, yeah, and I'm totally fine with like just going into the shorthand of that, of saying, yes, but it seemed like because it was started at the party when she would break off to talk to Ash and then they would like leave almost immediately. Like it seemed like they were remembering more from the loops, then
I'm having trouble remember. I don't remember if they were remembering or if they were just cutting through it. You know, we know what happens. Let's get to the end where it is going to be different.
Right.
I don't remember.
yeah. I think just some little note, like basically Paul saying like we only have 15 minutes because it takes me 15 minutes to get you guys on board. You know, something like that.
Right. Right. 15 minutes later.
Right.
All right. Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Good show.
Well-
let's continue watching it, shall we? All right. I've been Paul.
I've been Jonathan.
And this has been the measure of an episode.
We now have new characters.
But you already knew that.
He's like drunk while eating an orange.